Hi, it's Scott at the XFed Homestead. Well, I'm standing here in front of the woodshed that I built many years ago, and I just started thinking about times where I'd be stacking wood with my kids. My two boys learned a lot about stacking wood and splitting and cutting wood. Well, I've had some here in the driveway actually that I got in the spring, and it's been aging out in the driveway, and so I've let it dry out there. But now it's time to put it away, because fall always reminds me that winter's coming and it's time to stack some wood for the wood stove. So I've got my wheelbarrow here, and I thought I'd just talk about stacking wood and some of the things that you learn about when you're doing that kind of thing. It's kind of a tradition for me every fall to just get to stacking wood. I like wood, I enjoy woodworking, I like carpentry, I like splitting wood, I like the smell of wood. It's just enjoyable for me. So one of the things that I really enjoy though is when I'm in the house on a cold winter's day and I've got that wood stove going. There is nothing like wood stove heat. Now I built an open-sided 8-foot by 8-foot woodshed over a dozen years ago, and every year I enjoy stacking wood. I get about 3 cords of wood into this, and a cord is 4 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet of wood. Usually that's 3 rows of 18-inch wood, 16 to 18-inch logs that is split and stacked 4 by 4 by 8 foot. And so this fits about 3 cords, and I have it stacked right up to the gills. And, well, I've stacked most of the wood that I've had this winter, and as I've been going about doing the stacking, I've been thinking about several things. Well, over time, I would talk with my boys as we were stacking wood, and I stack the different piles different ways. This column here, as I call it, I said it was 3 by 3. I'll make columns, and in between them, I'll just put the wood loosely. And like I used to tell my kids, they'd say, well, how tight do we have to stack it? Because the looser it is, the more air that will circulate and dry the wood. But the tighter it is, the more wood you get in your woodshed. So I tell them the way I always heard it. You want to stack your wood loose enough so that a mouse can get through, but not the cat that'd be chasing it. So that was a little folksy wisdom that I had picked up. And over time, I would talk to my children as they got older. I would tell the boys that the way you stack wood says something about you as a man. And they would look at me and go, oh, Dad, we don't need to hear another story. And I said, the way you stack wood says something about whether you're patient, whether you're diligent, whether you're hardworking, whether you do things right or just do them quickly, whether you're going to get things done the right way or the easy way. It says something about your character. And so when you stack wood, you have to be careful and diligent and understand that there are safety aspects to it. You don't want a pile of wood falling down on someone. You have to do it the right way. And so over the years, they'd hear these things, and you just hope with kids that you plant the seed. And so one day I took my son when he was 14 to his first job, which was doing yard work for an old man in the next town. And he had gotten the job himself and asked me to drive him. So I drove him there, and I kind of took a look around the place. I talked to the old man, and he wanted Joe to mow his lawn, which he could certainly do. And he said, well, there's other things that you can do too. And Joe said, like what? And the old man said, well, do you know how to stack wood? And Joe looked over at me and he said, yeah, I know how to stack wood. And he smiled, knowing that all the lessons that I had taught him over the years were starting to come to a point where he could utilize those lessons himself. And so I was thrilled that years of trying to plant that seed had finally grown some fruit. Now I have the basically straight wood over here, and I've thrown the twisted wood a little closer to the camera over there, and I'll pick that up last. But I am almost through stacking this quarter wood, and it's funny, they'll always say wood warms you twice, when you're splitting it and when you're burning it. So I think that goes for stacking too. It's a cool day today, but I'm starting to feel the sweat in this sweatshirt. You know, I think about the years that I had my boys stacking wood, and it was a great parental tool, because I would say you got to split your wood before you can come in for supper, and make sure that's done. And there was one time my younger boy tested me on that, and he sat down for a nice supper, and I said, "You finished stacking your wood?" And he said, "Oh, I'll get it after dinner, Dad." And I said, "Oh, no." I said, "You got to do that before supper. And now supper time and you haven't done it, so there's no supper for you." And he thought that was pretty harsh. But I will tell you this, it's lessons like that that teach children responsibility. And now those two boys, they got out of college, they got their own apartments, got their own cars, they're paying their own way in the world. They're young men. One is working, the other's in medical school, and they're both contributing members of society. And I think that's one of the things that one of those seeds that you plant when they're young. And working in the wood pile is part of that, in my opinion. It certainly doesn't hurt. And now I find that both of them have a willingness to work, and that is something that's hard to find nowadays, in my opinion. Just something to think about. So this wood here is the wood that will go these 3 rows here. So 1, 2, 3, that's about 1.5 cords, almost 2. That I will burn this winter. And then I'm stacking these 3 rows here. 1, 2, and then a third that you can't quite see from this angle. I'm stacking those for next year. And so I like to keep the wood at least 1.5 years of age before I throw it in the wood stove. And that's always worked well for me. Some people say you can get away with 6 months of wood drying out, but I've never found that to be true. And so I like to stack it and keep it for 1.5 years. So every year I buy wood in the spring, and I will use that wood 1.5 years later, the following winter. And that's always worked out great for me. Now this is the wheelbarrow that I fixed in my very first video here on the X-Fed Homestead regarding plastic welding. And so I've been throwing logs into this, not as harshly as my father used to, but I've been throwing logs into it in order to stack the wood here today. One of the other things that you can do to ensure that you have a good stack of wood is to take every level or every other level and stack it in 1/2 inch or 1 inch from a vertical plumb line. And that way, as the wood ages and dries out, it sinks into itself like you would stack a rock wall, so that over the years, as frost heaves go up and down, the wall kind of sinks into itself and strengthens itself rather than weakens itself. And I can show you a good example over here and a bad example of doing that over here. Let me move the wheelbarrow, I'll show you what I mean. This particular pile of wood looks pretty good, but as you move over to the side, you start to see that this second pile, this second column is bulging out at the bottom. And what happened is sometime during the year, that piece of wood right there fell over. It was laying on this side here, and it twisted a little, and it caused the whole pile at the top to bulge out. Now I smacked it back as good as I could, but the wood behind it had fallen in, so there wasn't much room. That's going to be actually the first pile I take this winter, and then I'm going to work into it and then take into the front of the pile. So that's how I'm going to do that. But I just got to keep an eye on it, because that really could fall down and be dangerous. Over here on this pile, I had a neighbor who needed some wood, so I took some out of it. But you can see, if you look at this vertically, it goes up straight and then it starts to move in and starts to lean in. So over time, that starts to fall into the rest of the pile rather than fall out. And so that's a pretty good example of what you like to see. Now, this pile here, I've taken some logs from it already and stacked them up, and just left the columns there. I'm going to take those down shortly. But the other thing about having wood on hand is that I had a neighbor, and he called me up and said, I'm having a big party with 100 people for a fundraiser, and I don't have any dry wood. And so he had done me a huge favor before, and I took over my biggest wheelbarrow of wood, stacked it up as full as I could make it, and rolled it over there. And so he ended up having a pretty good party and had plenty of wood for his fire pit. So it's always good to have extra wood on hand. Well, I'm all done stacking the wood now. I've got plenty for this winter and some for next year. And I was thinking, as I was finishing up here, I was talking about my boys and when we used to stack wood, and how I'd say, how you stack wood says something about you as a man. Those words kind of came back to me, and I said, I wonder what my stack of wood says about me, and how I stack my wood says something about me as a man. That's how I stack my wood. This is Scott for the Homestead. We'll see you next time.